Yes, well, we'll take you off the screen when we're ready. I thought when I spoke, I would get up on the screen. But anyway, let's just get this going. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yes.
Have a seat, right?
Okay, well, thank you all for coming in. Short notice, this has been a trauma this time, but we think we have a working. It's our first Zoom. We do live programs here every month and one, but this is the first time we're doing this. And so it's been an experience. So for the Zoom audience, I ask you all to mute. I'm told to ask you to mute. When you have questions later in the program for our speaker, if you would just make them in the chat function of Zoom, then we'll read them out to the speaker. For the rest of you, welcome to the Newtown Square Historical Society. This is a great program. Louise, well, I'll just read her intro. Louise is our speaker. She's a first-time filmmaker, producer, director, writer on these projects. So she was an alumni of Ellis, and she saw that all the alumni were aging, you know, and she thought someone needs to capture these stories, you know, before they disappear. And then she nominated herself as that someone. That's an amazing story in itself. Her career spans a range of interests from seventh grade science teacher to public health professional to e-learning instructional designer. She's a semi-retired person enjoying her time on the eastern shore of Maryland down in Chestertown. We are going to show about 20 minutes of the film, and then we're going to bring her online, and you can ask her questions about the whole experience. So thank you for coming out. Now comes the good part. So let's start with the movie, which I do by sharing screen for Accidental Sisters. And I say share. Oh, and I mute myself. Do I mute myself? I don't know.
And go back to the beginning.
Okay. And there's our speaker, Louise, speaking.
Got it.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
It's wonderful to grow up with 15 or 16 sisters.
We were really sisters.
Exactly.
And yeah, it was a special one. I would have traded for nothing. I loved every minute of it.
And we didn't have some of the larger classes that the 60s had, but there was always this common thread of sisterhood that was present in each and every class.
And it was more like living at home maybe with older sisters.
It was like having 19 sisters. And what it did for me was gave me an appreciation for very different kinds of people.
Like I met Lynette and Kathy in 7th grade, and we're still like sisters from the Ellis experience.
I did end up loving Ellis, and I still feel very, very close to these girls, sisters, accidental sisters.
In April of 2019, we had our 100th anniversary of the founding of the school. And I decided it's now or never. We're getting older, and I wanted to get the stories of these alumni before it was too late. The history of the school was falling into obscurity, so the time was now to do that. There were also questions I had throughout my life about what the school meant. And was it unique, or was it just like other schools of the era? There were questions I wanted to explore about my own experience at Ellis. When I think about the impact that the school had on me, honestly, I have to say it was mostly about social mobility and how I experienced the rest of the world as a result of my experiences at Ellis.
When I graduated from school, I was pretty sure I could do anything.
I had core values, I guess I would say, to go on to college. I didn't really have a pathway. Ellis gave me that pathway. It gave me a sense of stability to really learn and grow and develop.
I studied very hard. I came to the conclusion, because I was a scholarship student, that no one was going to leave me any money. And the way to go forward in this world was to get an education. I recognize that had I gone to a public school in Philadelphia, things might have turned out differently.
We learned life skills. We had chores, we had to clean, we didn't have to cook, thank God. I still don't know how to cook, but we had to set the tables, be waitresses, sewing, laundry. There was a lot of discipline. Right. Like it. And for me, I needed that.
When I was very little, I wanted to be a boy because I felt boys had more rights. As I got older, I wouldn't want to be a boy anymore. But when I was young, I thought things went better for boys than for girls.
I would have been a very different person if I had stayed in the public school system and hadn't had the experience of only girls in the classes, so you're not afraid to talk or be smart.
My mom was a really strong person. I had never seen a father because I was an infant. So I had never seen a mother that consulted any man or consulted anybody. A decision needed to be made, she made it.
I followed my sister, and I remember her saying to me that, you won't have to fight off boys in the class. And you know what, when I went to a co-ed college, I thought that was true. I was one of the few young women in the class who would really, if a male said something and I disagreed with it, I had no trouble and felt very comfortable saying, well, this is my view. And I got a reputation for that at Duquesne, actually.
I went into the Navy, went to college, graduated from college, and then went into the Navy, active duty as an officer. And it was a predominantly, at the time, male field. There weren't a lot of women. And it didn't bother me at all.
After I got my PhD, I was an associate professor of economics for several years. Then I worked at Virginia Power, which is a big power company, for 16 years. I was the first woman director, the first woman manager, the first woman district manager, the first woman officer. I rose to the position of vice president and treasurer and so forth.
My stepfather, when I was about a junior or senior in high school, he said, well, what do you plan on doing? And I said, well, secretarial work of some sort. He said, did you ever think of going into business machines? And I said, like what? And he said, well, there's all kinds of business. He said, there's a place called IBM. And he said, why don't you look in? He said, I know they have schools to teach people how to use their machines. So I became a key punch operator at RCA Victor.
We were told that we were the creme de la creme. We were the best things going, and we believed it, thought it was absolutely true. And I guess I've lived my whole life on that premise that whatever I'm called to do, I can do. And all that confidence came from school.
Extraordinary girl, you're the girl that makes me smile.
Ellis truly did start in 1919 with the arrival of the first girls. Of course, it started long before that with his will and countless meetings and looking for where to have this school. But in 1919, the first little girls arrived.
This was started in the early 1920s. And so obviously the thinking came out of circumstances before that. And there would be the feeling, the widespread feeling that boys could take care of themselves better, boys could work.
There were a fair number of educators around that time who felt that boys and girls needed to be educated separately because they were just too different. They weren't all raving sexists, but many of them were. And there were developmental theories at the time that were claiming that if girls were stressed too much, right, by intellectual pursuits, that bad things would happen to them. So I think the idea was that in some people's minds, that girls would benefit from a certain kind of education and they would be better mothers that way, right? And so that was behind some of the push to have the single sex classrooms.
There was a lot of focus on skill development. The first Vocational Education Act came in the same period during the Wilson administration, which would have been just before the Ellis School. So there certainly was concern with helping people learn practical skills and learn a trade. Concern about children, and a lot of historians have written about this for the entire Western world, really flowered with the Industrial Revolution or the late 19th century in many parts of Europe as well as America. And, so what to do with poor children, what to do with working children, what to do with children, who didn't go to college or were well-to-do. There was a big push for institutionalization in the early decades of the 20th century. Institutionalization was still big, through the 50s into the 60s. There started to be advocacy against this. And, it took a while, really till the 70s and 80s, until deinstitutionalizing became, policy, essentially. Your themes here of, there are orphanages, there are single-sex schools, there are trade schools, all kind of fits in with that.
For most girls on scholarship, the reason they ended up at Charles Ellis School was that their moms had to work. They had many children. There was no child care. So this was a good place for them to be. And then their brothers would often be sent to the Stephen Girard School in Philadelphia. For girls on tuition, oftentimes it was because they would get a better education at the school, or there was some disruption in their home life.
There were lots of people who had similar experiences about being inconvenient truths in their families. A lot of people whose parents paid for them to be there. I would say I'm definitely one of them. I wasn't living with my parents. I was living with an aunt and uncle because my stepmother and I didn't really blend. And I think I was a little too much for my aunt and uncle. So my grandmother sent me off to prep school. And I was relieved to get away, honestly. I had a very conservative set of, aunt and uncle were just terrified with this young person that wanted to wear lipstick.
I was already at Ellis when my father died. He wasn't in the picture in my 7th grade year. He died suddenly in my 8th grade year. But I had already been accepted. They had accepted me just based on his absence.
There was no Social Security. Social Security, I think, was inaugurated in '36 and had not been fully funded by the time we were entering school. And I know my mother had never worked until my father died. She was 43 years old.
I came from an orphanage up in Germantown, and my mother was unwell and was concerned that my sister was out at Ellis. She was concerned that she would pass, and she wanted her girls to be together.
I lived out in the country, and the public school was not accredited by the state. So that meant no chance of college.
I guess it was in 9th grade. My mom and I didn't get along very well at all. and I heard about Ellis, and it was kind of my chance to escape.
My father had passed away when I was 1. My brother went to Girard College, and through my brother going to Girard College, my mother found out about Charles E. Ellis School for Girls.
My mother, the reason I went to Ellis was that she went back to work at Provident Mutual Trust Company. And she was one of the girls of this vice president who was on the board of trustees of Ellis College School for Fatherless Girls. And he found out that he had a widow with a little girl and told her about the college and made arrangements for me to go there. It was a major sacrifice for her. And she came to see me every week. At that time at Ellis, we went home every other weekend. And then it was once a month, but I saw her every week.
I was glad, and when I look back on it, I had a better time. My stepfather was an alcoholic. They fought all the time. And I didn't have to live through a lot of that my sister did.
I was an only child, and there were not many other children around where I lived. That I think they wanted me to, go to a boarding school and get some socialization.
I was not the princess that my parents wanted me to be. I was not a good student. I was I had an older sister who was perfect, and I never was. My name wasn't on the honor roll in the paper every month, and so off to boarding school I went.
My father died when I was 11. He was a doctor, and he was on staff at Bryn Mawr Hospital, and there were 3 of us. I was the oldest, and it was rather sudden, and my parents were going through a divorce at the time, so not a happy period.
For me, being in the military, going from school to school, didn't ground me academically. I knew I wanted to get ahead in the world, like my aunts and uncles all had done, but moving from school to school wasn't going to do that for me. So Ellis was for me a lifesaver, opportunity to settle down, be in an environment, a good environment.
The guidance counselor at the public school that I attended had taught my mother when she was in 7th grade and my sister when she went to elementary school. And when I went, she was the guidance counselor. And she was the one that researched and found Ellis. And she did some tests, which I didn't have any idea why I was taking all these tests.
They gave me tests. I had to take tests. And I went with my mother, I think it was in July, it was very hot. And we took the bus and out to 69th Street. And I was so nervous, I threw up at the gate. I was so nervous that I wouldn't make the grade.
I had to take a test, and it was an intelligence test. But I didn't have any sense of, am I doing well, not doing well? I just knew what it was.
The reason I fell in love with Ellis was truly the grounds and the building. It was just beautiful. It was really beautiful. That main building with those huge columns.
It was so beautiful. After Germantown, Philadelphia, and going out to public school in Philadelphia, it was wonderful.
The first time I saw the campus, I had to come out for a physical. I just thought it was the most beautiful place I had ever been.
I just landed here as happy as a clam because all that sadness in my house was not there. It was a big fun slumber party. I remember some girls were in the cottage crying, and I didn't understand it.
I was a little shocked when my mother told me I was going to be going away to a school, but I liked it here. I loved the smallness of it. It felt small. I knew everybody. We all knew each other. We knew the house mothers, we knew the people, the teachers. We ate dinner with them, we ate all our meals. I liked it.
We had to walk away, 2 and 3 times with this walking, and I think it really made us strong. And the food was very good. I mean, the nutrition was good. So I think I benefited through life up until, but I really think that exercise and the fresh air and the communing with nature, we always noticed the trees and we laughed and the sky at night. And it was really an experience that a city kid wouldn't have.
Mendelssohn Meehan came on board in 1923. He was hired by Dr. Carl Aretz, who was the second president of Ellis. And the Mehans were very, very famous in the nursery business in Philadelphia. The son, Mendelssohn, came to Ellis and became the horticulturalist for our campus. He started in 1923 and realized the first buildings went up in 1922. So he had a blank slate in which to plant all the trees and the bushes that we remember that made it into such a beautiful campus. The 320 acres were filled with over 600 varieties of trees and bushes, and in 1936 it was named a nationally recognized arboretum, the biggest on the whole East Coast. When it was sold, the arboretum was cared for by ARCO, and they did a very, very good job. But subsequent sales of this parcel and that parcel, so much of it has been cut down, bulldozed, so it no longer exists.
Now that is around, I'd asked where I should cut it, and that's about 20 minutes, but I couldn't leave it there. And so let's fast forward a little bit because I love this next section. And then we'll take some questions. So 25. Oh, come on, come back here.
Wouldn't have to ride the bus to go to my mother's funeral.
Romance.
Boys were nice, and I was eager to get to know them better.
I think our life revolved around the dances that we had. I just looked through my yearbook and I'd see most of it is about the dances that we were either getting ready to go to or memories of ones we had just attended. We danced with boys from Girard and we danced with boys from Williamson. And I eventually married one of them.
I was really flat-chested, and we would have those dances with the school boys at different schools, and my classmates decided that I needed to have breasts. So they stuffed paper, newspaper, in there. And I went to the dance, and I danced with a young man, and it was itching so much. I then went and took all my breasts out and put them behind the decorations because it was so terrible. So I literally, and the boy's name was James Bushy, and the exciting part, he didn't notice anything because I like sports. I love sports, and men usually love to talk about sports.
Not angry.
But anyway, I literally went from having these massive paper chests to just being flat-chested.
All those wonderful dances. Those mandatory dances. Right, where you lined up by your height.
Joanne,
and got matched with anybody who was nearly your height.
I hated the dances that they had. Oh my gosh, we hid in the locker room for half the dances.
After a few dances, Dr. Look had a white line painted sort of down towards his house. And at the end of the road that went out to 252. And after a dance, you were allowed to walk your date to the white line, but you better not put a foot over the white line. But when we were seniors, that law was rescinded, and we weren't even allowed to go that far. In high school, we were taken to Valley Forge Military Academy, where we were supposed to engage in dancing with the men there, and that was fun. That was our only experience with meeting men. I mean, boys, you know. So some of the girls cried they didn't like who they were with.
It was very rare for somebody to actually have somebody they knew as their date. I remember Jean McDowell. It was like, wow, she's so lucky. She knows the guy.
There was a boy from the Valley Forge Military Academy that I dated, and in my senior prom, he informed me that he had actually had to get married over Christmas because he had gotten a girl pregnant. So I actually was at my senior prom with a boy who had knocked up a girl, and he was married.
The desire to leave Ellis was based principally on, oh my gosh, I don't want to be in a girl's environment all my life.
Okay, that was the That was the happy ending, I thought, after, yeah. And there's more, and you're going to find out where to see the rest of it. But let me stop screen sharing and try to bring on Louise. Louise, how do we bring you onto the screen?
I think I'm on.
Now you are. Okay. So here comes the hard part. We can ask questions of the audience and see whether you hear them or not. And then if you don't, I'll relay the question to you from here. Okay. And we'll also do the questions from, I see people have raised their hand, so we'll work through what that means. So let's start in the live room with the first question. Terry. Was the school sold in 1977?
It was sold in 1978 to Atlantic Richfield.
Okay. Can you hear that?
Once it was sold, were the grounds open to the public to walk on?
Once it was sold, were the grounds open to the public to walk on?
So I wish the historian who you saw in the film were able to be here tonight. She just had surgery and she couldn't make it. I can't say that I'm much of a historian. I was really interested more in the women's stories about their experiences there. So honestly, I don't know. There's maybe some of the women on Zoom might know. Raise your hand if you know. Susan Holt might know.
Okay,
yeah, I know. I do know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now, can you hear this?
I can. I heard the question. I just didn't know if you could hear me.
Yeah, hold on.
Well,
now we'll see how this works. Go ahead, speak, Susan.
do I have to do something from my end, or can you hear me?
You're good, Susan.
Speak.
Oh, okay. Well, I just lost the picture, but as long as you can hear me, it doesn't matter. You couldn't. I think it was Atlantic Richfield. They had gates, and you couldn't go on the property. I remember one time trying to go when I was living in Ohio, but I was back locally, and I drove up and I said to the guy in the gatehouse, I'd like to just drive through the campus because I lived here for 8 years. And he said to me, I'll tell you what you can do. You can just drive right around this gatehouse and make a U-turn and go out. So it was not welcoming. And I believe it was when Atlantic Richfield owned it, but it might have been the next owners. It was kind of like they thought we were going to steal secrets or something. I don't know what they were doing there, but you weren't allowed on the campus at that time. Did you hear any of that?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Okay.
And so a member of the audience said they didn't open it up to the public until after it was sold to SAP.
Okay.
Okay. She said she used to monitor the Bluebird boxes on campus, and she had to check in with the guard when she came in. So some people were allowed in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else in the live audience? Yes. What grades did the school cover?
Do you oh, okay.
Go ahead, Sue.
No, I'm sorry.
I mean, my understanding is it started like in 1919, 22 with very young girls coming in. I mean, 6, 7 years old. And then as the school progressed, each year or so, they would drop some of the younger ages. Now, I went when I was in 7th grade, in 1962, but I know in the earlier years, in the 50s, girls were coming in at age 9, 10. Sue,
That was, yeah, I was 9, and I started in 1954 as a 5th grader, and at that time there were 2 girls in the 4th grade, and I think 6 of us in the 5th grade. We were a combined classroom.
and they were phasing out the younger ages.
Right. I think by the time I graduated, gosh, I think there were 6, they had dropped the 5th graders, the 4th and 5th graders. But we were, in the mid 50s, we were about 9 and 10 when we would enter.
And so a lot of the classes before 1956, when the camp closed, those girls, the 40s girls and 30s girls, came in as campers over the summer. So they didn't start in September. They started in like June or July, going to Camp Tonawanda. And so I have a lot of memories on the film about Camp Tonawanda. That was closed by the time I got there.
That was closed this summer. I never went there either. That closed sometime, I think in the early
56.
That was closed because of Hurricane Hazel. 1956, Hurricane Hazel destroyed a big part of it. And afterwards, because we were required at the time to go to camp unless you were not staying in Philadelphia. So after they closed the camp, then we would stay in the cottages.
Yes. Right. So that enrollment was through high school and ended at 12th grade.
Yeah.
Yes.
And whoever said it in the opening, the 60s really were sort of the peak enrollment. And it sort of built up, and then started to decline in the 70s.
Okay. The one follow-up question was, in the one picture of the bus, it said Ellis College, and locals know it as Ellis College, but it was not a college. It was the old school's college, I guess, just the term.
That was the old term for institutions of this type, and it was called Girard College. I guess it still is.
Right.
And it didn't mean higher education. It meant an educational institution.
Okay.
They changed the name to Ellis School for Girls in 1949.
Okay. Is there, should I be looking for, I checked on chat and I don't see any questions right now. Any more, this gentleman in the live audience?
Just an observation. I actually worked in electrochemical in 1984 for several years. And as a kid, college graduate, right out of college, the campus was beautiful. As a matter of fact, my interview and my discussions to get my position at the facility, the people that I interviewed spent more time talking about working on this beautiful campus than what I would actually do. And as it ended up, I don't remember how many buildings, but there were certainly quite a number of original buildings in quote. And I happened to work in a group that was responsible for all sorts of miscellaneous projects on campus, most of them obviously related to coming up with the next tech line. But I happened to be involved in a project of getting air conditioning into a couple of the original buildings. And one of the points that I was told, under no circumstances can you change the building. You can't put holes in it. You can't do anything that would damage the original stone buildings, which was a rather interesting challenge of getting air conditioning into the building. And also, the same comment was made about trees. I guess I didn't appreciate that it actually was an arboretum. But again, The people who work there, it's looted, it was looted around with the beautiful trees. The one right next to the I'm assuming it's still there. There was a little pond in the room. And that pond had snapping turtles in it. And the big crisis was always when the snapping turtles, for those who have been here for any length of time, would escape and go down to the DuPont estate and start attacking their ducks or geese, whatever special waterfowl they had there. But that was a big deal. They actually would hire people to go out and track down the snapping turtles so they didn't go down into the DuPont estate.
What year was this?
84 to 87.
Well, in the film, towards the end, Carolyn Anderson talks about the trees, and underneath the trees, each class, and the alums who are on here now will remember this, we had time capsules. And during the tree planting, each class had to plant a tree, and we would put together a time capsule which would go under our class tree. And I asked Carolyn, well, the trees have been bulldozed. What happened to the time capsules? And she said, they're gone.
So there was a question, who are the people in the live audience? People who live in Newtown Square? Who are you people? Yes, this is live from the Newtown Township building. So these are local people who have come to the see the program.
Well, that's great that they have an interest in Charles Ellis School for Girls. Yay.
Yeah, it's still there.
We used to, we would be allowed off campus. I mean, I graduated in 62. So up until then, we could go off campus on Saturdays, I think between 2 and 4 in the afternoon or something. But we would walk down, to Newtown Square. There was a little penny candy store down there. There wasn't much there, but we loved going to the square because that's the only thing we were allowed to do. But it was sort of a small town at that point. There wasn't a whole lot there. I remember I was Episcopalian, so we would go to, I think it's called St. Albans. I'm not sure. There was
That's right.
Yeah, St. Albans Episcopal Church, and on Sundays we would walk down there and go to church. But
And I went to Trinity Lutheran in Broomall. No Lutherans. I don't hear any comments.
So church was not required.
Church was required.
it was.
Okay. Was there a chapel on campus?
No.
No.
There was a Friends meeting house.
Yeah, I went to Friends meeting.
Yeah, there was a Friends meeting on the back by 252.
Yeah.
Just at the end of the road.
That's
It's still there
right?
and still open. Yep, still there, still open. Come out on Sundays at 10.
And we Jewish girls had to go to study hall.
Oh, yeah.
When I, how can you talk on this?
Wait a minute. Can I follow up with Susan Sussman about that? Susan Sussman, did they not know of any synagogues in the area?
I can't answer that question. I can't speak for what they knew or didn't know. And I guess it just never dawned on us that we could ask about it. And, there had to have been a synagogue somewhere in the vicinity, but it never dawned on us to ask.
This is Barbara Elser. I'm class of 61. And there was a Jewish synagogue that I think either had burnt to the ground or something. So during my time there was a synagogue that actually met in the auditorium on Saturdays.
Oh.
Well, that's weird because
I remember walking by, and that was my first kind of experience with hearing cantors and whatnot, because windows would, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Learn something new.
There's a question from the live audience.
Can't hear you.
I'll repeat it. There's a beautiful ballroom with Greek columns that still exists, that is now a wedding location with a local caterer. But the question was, what was that building used for in your time? What kind of activities?
Classrooms.
Classrooms.
That was the main building. That's where we went for all of our classes.
And admin offices. That's where Dr. Franz, Dr. Look, I mean, that's where all the administration was.
The library.
Classes.
Yeah.
Classrooms were also there.
Mrs. Lickery.
Yes, social dean.
So when you had like dances, did you have dances at the school, or did you go away for the dances?
Both.
Both.
Okay. Were the dances held in the ballroom or the?
There was no ballroom.
We didn't have a ballroom.
The Greek column building. What was the name of it?
The main building.
Main building.
Just the main building.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, Ellis Hall.
Yeah, but we didn't call it that.
No, we didn't, but the name of the building is Ellis Hall.
Okay.
There was
Yes.
there's a gymnasium. That's where we had all of our
That's
dances.
where the
That's the
dances
thing.
were.
That's a health club now, I think.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Question from the live audience. Right.
It was an auditorium, with built-in auditorium began stage.
So a live. The live member said, right now it's a ballroom. It's a catering hall. They set it up. But when two people in the audience said they had walked through during the renovations and there was still seating for auditorium style seating. And
There never
Arco,
was auditorium style seating.
Arco used it as a conference center.
Yeah.
But while we were there, there was no auditorium at all.
Yeah.
It was just a series of classrooms.
Yes.
You should come, if you haven't seen it, you should come back and see it. It's spectacular.
Oh, we've seen it
Okay.
at our reunions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's maybe more spectacular if you weren't a
The
student
ballroom.
there.
Exactly.
It's not quite so spectacular if you want to remember it the way it was.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's some table talk in the live room. Have you seen the grounds recently?
2019, I was there.
Pre-COVID?
Now, I was out that way about a year ago, and I could see all the buildings and all the condos or apartments or whatever they're putting up. To be honest, I thought that was going to happen a long time ago. I mean, I'm surprised it took this long for them to take up all the land. I really liked it previously, but
We all did.
yeah.
The president's house has just been destroyed.
Right.
You mean the town center, the Newtown Town Center?
No, where the president's house was
Used to-
down.
Right, that's going to be the Newtown Town Center. That's what it's been demolished for. So,
But Dr. Franz.
And Madeline.
Oh, wait a minute. Do you remember? I don't know what school he came from, but we called him Red Sox. He
Richie
always
Red
wore.
Sox, Episcopal Academy. He was a friend of the family.
Right.
He was a
He was well
librarian.
read, and he used to say he was well read. That's why he wore his red socks.
Because he was a librarian, yes.
Episcopal Academy had a lower, middle, and upper school at 3 different locations. And about 15 years ago, they bought a huge part of the DuPont property here, and they've moved all of their locations to that one location. It's a beautiful new campus. So that's another thing to see if you come back to visit. It's right down the the road on what used to be John DuPont's back 40.
That would
Any
have been convenient for school dances.
Yeah. Then you would have been dancing with the Episcopal boys.
We
Yes,
did,
live
we
audience.
did dance with Episcopal.
Episcopal, Petty, a lot of them don't exist anymore. Bordentown, Hill School.
Hill School is still there.
Yeah, Hill's still there. VFMA. Perkiomen. Yeah.
Okay, question from the live audience.
If you're looking at the wall, and if you're coming in from Westchester Pike, I think it was 2 or 3 stone buildings, and then there's like 2 or 3 on the other side of the wall. Were they teachers' places where the teachers lived, or were they students?
The cottages, what were they used for?
We lived there. We all lived in one.
Yes, the what we know is the stone cottages. What were they used for? The ones that still exist.
The kids.
Dorms and
We lived there.
classrooms.
The students lived there, but when Arco purchased it, they took what essentially would have been 3 bedrooms and they made them into suites in 2 of the cottages, but they didn't have enough money to turn over they were gorgeous because Arco had a event where they invited former students back.
Yeah.
And they were gorgeous what they had done to the interior of it for obviously upper drawer commercial purposes. But yeah, they were I don't know, 18, 22, 24 of us in each dorm, give or take.
In each one of those cottages.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the house, of course.
And a common bathroom. And we ate in the dining hall.
In the 50s, our class, like when I started as a 5th grader, they were numbered. They were cottage number like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And in that first cottage, as you drive in from Westchester Pike, that was cottage number 4. And downstairs in each one of those cottages, there was a classroom. And so in the downstairs of cottage number 4 was our classroom. And it was about, like I said, about 8 of us, 4th and 5th graders. So we'd have all of our classes. And then the next year we moved up to the next cottage, and that was 6th grade. We didn't get to go into the main building until 7th grade. But
don't forget the White House.
And the White House, was for 9th graders. But
Ninth graders. Well, when I first went there, I was in 8th grade when I went there. They mixed some of us 8th graders in with the 9th graders. I was in cottage 4 my first year, so I went in 6th grade. I'm class 61, and the White House was near the swimming pool. For those of you who may never have seen it, that's probably long demolished. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And then back in the 40s and 30s, each of the cottages had their own kitchen, and they were responsible for cooking for themselves.
And then the girls ate there. I know there are pictures in your film of the girls eating together. Was that in the cottages as well?
Yep. And that changed. I learned this from the women who were talking. During the war, there was gas rationing. And so it was too much to go around to all deliveries to all the different cottages. So they consolidated the dining room into one cottage. And they all then started to going to that one cottage. And then after that, the commons was built. And then we all ate over
we all ate there, yeah.
And the infirmary back there.
You didn't eat in the infirmary.
No, I know what I'm saying, but the infirmary was behind the commons. It was right next to it.
Right.
There were some crazy nurses, I remember.
Yeah, listen.
I have a question for Louise. You're a first-time filmmaker. What gave you the idea that you could pull this off?
Who's asking me that?
Doug.
Well, my job right before I retired was as an instructional designer for e-learning. And if you've ever done I shouldn't say if you've ever done e-learning. If you've ever done good e-learning, it's very similar to the film production process. It's very visual. It's very, you have to have, you know, you have to understand audio. You have to understand pacing. A lot of the e-learning I used had film clips in it. So I had to work with filmmakers, industrial filmmakers to, you know, make small films to explain how to do things. So I always had some familiarity with the filmmaking process. And then I just sometimes just jump in and do things, figuring that I'll figure it out, asking people. And then my friend Mike, who, I don't know, were any of you filmed at the reunion in the hallway there in the hotel? Well, originally, my friend Mike, who worked in Hollywood, he was the one that convinced me I could do this, and he even offered to come and film it.
Wow.
And so he did. He filmed those first few interviews at the reunion. Then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And my budget was really low anyhow. So I said to Mike, I think we're going to have to do this on Zoom. And he was like horrified because he's a really good cameraman. And he said, it's not going to look good. It's not going to be pretty. Well, luckily, it's become sort of the norm. You know, I mean, people got used to seeing broadcast TV showing people on Zoom. So, you know, you don't sort of react when you see Zoom on the film as much, because that's what we did.
And we were really glad that you did it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was such a gift to all of us that went to Ellis. You were such a gift in taking this on. I mean, I think I speak for everybody in every single person that went there. I couldn't imagine that anybody could do this. I mean, I can barely do Zoom, but I just appreciate what you did so much.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the 34 plus women who took their time to talk to me. And I have to say, I mean, what you see is an hour and 15 minutes. I have hundreds of hours of footage that I had to cut. That was the most painful part.
I bet.
Because, I mean, some of the stuff that got cut, I loved. And it was like, oh, but it didn't fit. You know, we had to, you know, when you edit, things have to fit together. They have to tell a story. The pacing has to be right. So I don't know, maybe I'll do I'm not going to say that. I was going to say a sequel with the
mini series.
Before you end the meeting, can I make some comments?
Sure.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Neil Townsend. It says Beverly Townsend. Yeah.
Neil Townsend.
That's right. My parents.
Gosh.
My parents, Raymond and Georgia Townsend, taught on campus from 1951 to 1963.
Your dad taught me geometry.
Me too.
Your mom
and your mom ran the lower school.
I know.
She did the English. Oh my gosh.
She was the director of the lower school and taught English. My dad taught math and history. My sister Lois Townsend, I think she graduated about 1953 from Ellis. And we lived in what was then Cottage 3, which was
Cottage
torn
number
down.
3, yeah.
I remember.
When Arco moved in, they tore down our beautiful house. And my dad died March 2nd, 1963. It was a Saturday. And he had taught the Friday before. And then my mother passed away in 2000. And she's Carolyn Anderson has been mentioned a number of times. She was in contact with my mother for many years. And I've been back to the campus a few times since too. So I have many, many memories. I know the camp. I used to play at the pond down there. My parents used to have to chaperone these dances. They watched kids sledding on Suicide Hill. If anybody remembers that.
Yes.
I could go on and on.
Wait a minute,
about things.
Neil, I have to say something. Poor Neil had to sit at dinner time with
Right.
his mom at all the meals, and he was the only boy.
I know, we always felt so sorry for you.
I know.
Yeah.
And then, wait a minute, your mom used to say, because remember we would have apple pie for dessert, and she would say, apple pie without cheese is like a kiss without a squeeze. Your mom.
Yeah, we used to eat at the round table right by the exit door. I'd excuse myself and get on my bicycle and ride back home. But I have many, many fond memories
My
of.
God.
I didn't go to school there, obviously. I graduated from Marple, Newtown in 1965. I live in New Mexico now. I'm retired.
okay.
So
I wish I had known that you were around. I would have loved to have gotten you on camera. I have David France on camera.
I have all these interesting letters from Dr. Look, letters of recommendation to my, well, I don't know. It's a long, complicated story, but we moved there when I was 4 years old. And I lived there till my dad died. Later that year, they wanted us to, my mother and I, to move out of the nice cottage 3 and move up to a smaller house where I think Miss Reed lived there. I knew her quite well as well. And but then my mother went on to teach in the Marple Newtown public school system. And then eventually, after a short tenure there, she moved to taught middle school in Ossining, New York. And she retired from teaching in 1974 and moved to Arizona. And she passed away out there in 2000. She was
such
89.
a good teacher, and she was so fair. I remember that about her. She was just so
character.
She was so fair, and she was organized, and I loved math, so I loved your dad's geometry class. I mean, I can still picture him. He would walk down the aisles, just looking over at, like what we were doing. I just, oh my God, I loved your parents. Yeah,
Well,
they were just great.
They were.
Can I give my email out? And if anybody wants to share any memories with me, that'd be great. I'd get back to you too.
Sure.
Yeah, please do that. And then and then there's one last question and then we'll close it up for now.
Okay. It's N as in Neil, Neil is the way I spell my name. N Townsend 053 @gmail.com. And it'd be fun to hear reminiscence, and I'd share some of my memories as well with whoever was interested. So
is that all lowercase? Is that all lowercase?
Yeah,
okay.
All lowercase.
Okay.
Yeah, my friend Bob Schultz informed me of this meeting. His sister saw an ad or some notice of it. That's how I just happened to hear about it this morning. So I jumped right on it. So
that's great.
Nice to hear all of you, and good luck and best wishes.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The last question that I saw, it looks like it was answered in the chat. What year did the last class graduate and why did Ellis School close?
Money.
Oh, wow.
1977 is when it closed. And what happened, and what was the other question? Oh, why did it close?
When and why?
Yeah, so you have to watch the film. It's complicated. Nobody has the full answer. There's a lot of theory. There's a lot of things that happen that probably shouldn't have happened at the end of, you know, when the enrollment was going down, the building was going up. David Franz talks about this a little bit in terms of the kind of board of directors that oversaw the school. They were bankers, and they, unlike the way board of directors do things now, which are like they get involved in fundraising, they get involved in oversight, they're a lot more involved. These were bankers not involved, and there were money problems. Also, single-sex education was going out of style. Boarding schools were sort of going out of style in the 70s. It was just, it was a lot of social factors and as well as financial factors that all sort of came crashing in on, and that land became very valuable, was getting more and more valuable.
A lot more valuable.
So for Louise, if people want to see the whole movie, what are the ways they can do that?
So I put it in chat. For those of you who want to scroll up, I gave the link. But if you go to YouTube, this is the easiest way to go to YouTube and search for Accidental Sisters. And you should be able to find it that way. There are two postings there. One's the trailer, but then one's the full 75-minute film.
Yep.
And
you go to YouTube, and in the search, if you say Ellis College Accidental Sisters, then the trailer and the full movie come up 1, 2. We at the Newtown Square Historical Society will post a link to it on our Facebook page. And we've been recording this, and that's the next step of the tech process. If we can figure out what to do with it, we'll post that someplace.
Well, Doug, can I just say one thing about the Newtown Square Historical Society?
Sure.
A lot of the archival photos that you'll see in the film, Doug was so generous to provide. And they have that collection. I guess you still have that collection.
We do. We do.
Really some fantastic old photos of the origins of the school.
Right, and you'll see a lot of them in the film, but yeah, if for the alumni, Louise and I could work out a way to make that available to you so you could look through them, you know, a little at a slower pace than the movie does.
And then one more thing, if you go to my website for the film, and I have it in the chat, but I'll say it as well, www.ellisdoc.org. Go to the top, there are 3 lines, that's the menu, click on it, and it'll say, I always forget this, find out more. And I've posted, there was a history of the school written in 2007 by Thomas DiFilippo. And I've got that posted, and you can download it and read it. It has the full history. I have something from Carolyn Crosby, a diary that she kept when she was there in the 70s. And then I have something that Doug put together, some notes about the school that is at the Historical Society. All of those are downloadable if you want to read more about the history.
Okay, great. Well, let me just announce to everyone. I'll get out there, so in the video. So just we do these programs generally every month. Here, the next month, February 15th, day after Valentine's Day, we're going to be at the Newtown Square Firehouse, the new one. It's new in the last 2 years. Preston Tyrell, who is the fire department historian, we sit in their big conference room, beautiful space, and he does this. He posts up old pictures. He gives a story of the history. It's over 100 years of the history of the fire department, and then he's going to take us on a tour of of the thing. It's a beautiful new building. It's, so we're going to see that behind the curtain at the firehouse. So that is next month, February 15th at 7 o'clock at the firehouse on the Ellis College campus, which is, it's at 2 Charles Ellis Drive. So that's the newest resident on the Ellis College is the Newtown Square Fire Department. So I invite you to cookies, but we don't have any, but I actually put the YouTube link on these handouts. There were some over there. Louise initially had, she was going to sell CDs, so there's a card there if you want to buy your own CD. But then she had a very generous Ellis School alum who basically under her thing. And so, but that would give her some spending money. So take that postcard if you're interested in having your own copy, either on CD or there's a variety of things. It's just on this little postcard here. And we have the cookies tonight. So, thank you.
Cookies.
Thank
Thank you.
Louise. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you all. Thank you to the alums. And thank you, Doug.
Yep. Here, see if I can, there I am.
There you are.
There
Thank you
I am.
so much.
Yeah,
Well,
this
this
was
was-
great. Thanks so much.
Thank you all for coming out. This was, yeah, it was an achievement to do it in Zoom. This is our
And you
first
did
time
it.
doing
You
it.
did.
Yeah, so we might do the next one. So come to the firehouse next month too. We'll see.
Too painful.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank-
you.
Thanks,
Yep.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Neil. Yep.
Okay.